says we're free from the power of sin. Romans 7 says we're free from the law. Before Christ, and even as Christians, we can have a temptation in our excitement to want to please God to make our relationship with God based on fulfilling a set of rules, a checklist, doing the right thing, obeying the law, being focused on the law, being obsessed with the law and the commandments. And that can actually cause us to take our eyes off of Jesus. And Romans 7 talks about how when you try to keep the law, you will just live in a cycle of sin and shame, because you're going to end up doing the things you don't want to do, and you're not going to do the things you do want to do. And then Paul talks about this wrestle he goes through. He says, man, I want to obey. I delight in God, in my inner being. But then every time I try to obey, I find myself in bondage. And we use the analogy talking about the cookie jar, right? When you tell a kid, don't take a cookie from the cookie jar, that's going to arouse in that child a desire to now want to take the cookie because you told him not to. That's how the law works. When the law says do not do this and do this, it makes us want to almost sometimes go against it. And it makes us, it's a standard that if we try to obey, we're going to find that the sin indwelling us is going to keep us from being fully obedient to this law. And we're going to be sin conscious instead of son conscious. It also talks about how we're free from the law. We're free from the bondage to the law. We were once married to the law, but when we died with Christ, we were now free from the law, and now we belong to Christ. The focus of Christianity, Paul is saying, it's not in just merely principle obedience and commandment keeping, but it's now focused on a personal relationship with God, which actually now allows you to fulfill the new commandment of love. A new commandment I give to you, to love one another as I have loved you. And if you walk in love, you have fulfilled the law. It's now walking in the Holy Spirit. And Romans 7, I'm making it very clear, Paul's not saying the law is bad. Paul is not saying to disregard the law. Paul is not saying that the law is meaningless. Paul is saying that Christ is the end of the law, that the law is actually meant to point us to Christ. Now, we should still try to focus on the law and examine ourselves to see if we're breaking the law, but we should not be obsessed with the law in a way that's binding us. Okay, the law, Galatians says, is a schoolmaster to bring us to Christ. So Romans 8 now, it starts off, and it's amazing because it says this. And let me pray before I begin to share.